Hey, Peter. Peter. Hey, Jerry. What'll it take to get you in this yellow car? Cusco's poison. The poison for Cusco. Welcome to Soarin', USA. I've been, practicing my Patrick Warburton impression. How's it going? I don't know. My voice is a little scratchy, I think, because I've been doing this for 2 days straight. So, we're gonna get through the video. Yeah, voice is a little messed up, but I've got some water, I've got some tea, I think we're gonna be just fine. Friends, welcome back to the channel. It's your old pal, Mike. I hope that you're happy, healthy, and safe, and check it out, we got brave and cut my hair by ourselves, and it's not the worst haircut I've ever had, so yay, being bored. Friends, I did something hilariously irresponsible, and I can't wait to tell you all about it. I bought a guitar, one of my dream guitars, in fact, which makes no sense in this economy, or any economy, because we're not rich. I had the chance, and I took it, and I'm going to tell you all about it. Welcome to the first episode of Guitars I Definitely Own. I haven't really workshopped the title, we'll figure that out. Just play a thing. So the guitar I bought, well, it's not another offset Fender. I know that those are my favorites, and that's what you probably associate me with. This is something completely out of the ordinary for me, but it's one of my favorite kinds of guitars in the world. I bought myself a Gibson, a semi-hollow Gibson, in fact. You might not know this about me, but before I discovered the Jazzmaster in 2010, I was a Gibson diehard. That's all I played, and if you don't believe me, well, here's a picture for proof. This is my guitar collection, circa 2009, and you'll see there's not a Fender in sight. From the left, you're seeing a 2006 Les Paul Faded Mahogany, a 1977 ES355, there's also a 1968 Gibson SG, and a 1999 Les Paul Standard that I used to affectionately call Beverly after Dr. Beverly Crusher from Star Trek The Next Generation. The only one of these I still have is the Les Paul Studio, believe it or not. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. I got one of my dream guitars, and that happens to be a Gibson Trini Lopez. This guitar comes to me by way of a friend of mine. This guy is one of the kindest folks I've ever met, and in fact, we did meet face to face after many years of being Instagram friends at NAMM 2019, which was actually a huge year for Gibson. Gibson was just under brand new ownership. They were rolling out a ton of new and old models that seemed to be really improved in the quality control department. One of the most exciting things that Gibson announced that year, for me personally, was the re-release of the Trini Lopez Standard. The Trini Lopez has long been one of my favorite signature models in the history of Gibson guitar. They were originally available from 1964 through 1970, and even though it's a 335 shaped guitar, those little visual touches that Trini spec'd out, they just make that thing so attractive to me. So I'm really excited to finally have one. But before we get into what makes this guitar so special, I want to tell you a little bit more about its namesake. Born in Dallas, Texas in 1937, Trinidad Trini Lopez III is a Mexican-American musician who spent the early days of his career working in nightclubs. Trini formed his first band at the age of 15 in Wichita Falls, Texas, but by the time he was 18, well, he started getting attention from record producers. Sadly, prejudice against his Mexican heritage meant he had to continuously fight to use his own name on his own recordings. Anything but Lopez, they said. Even Buddy Holly's own record producer refused to release Lopez's recordings under his own name, even going so far as to stop him from singing on his own song. That recording was later released under the name The Big Beats, which was actually the name of Trini's backup band. He disbanded them soon thereafter. Lucky for Trini and the rest of us that he eventually caught the attention of none other than Frank Sinatra, who immediately signed him to an exclusive 8-year contract with his own label, Reprise Records. Trini then went on to have a massive string of hits, including his versions of the folk standards If I Had a Hammer and Lemon Tree. Sadly, as is the case with many signature models in the guitar world, a lot of people don't seem to know who Trini Lopez is or understand his legacy and his influence. And I mean, that goes without saying for most signature models. I know people who own a Silver Sky who have absolutely zero interest in John Mayer, And I mean, how many people in the world know what a Les Paul is, but don't really know who a Les Paul is? So before we get into the guitar, the specs, the pickups, all of that good stuff, I want you to go ahead and take a moment and look up Trini Lopez, his music, his work, his life. Trini Lopez is a gift, and we are so lucky to have him. And believe it or not, he's still going at it today. In fact, at NAMM 2019, when Gibson announced the return of the Trini Lopez standard, they had him on stage to talk about it. And if you look at this picture, there's a black Trini Lopez on stage with him, and I don't think that's my guitar. However, I am going to pretend that it's my guitar because that's cool as hell. And honestly, more than anything else about this guitar, I am just excited to have something with his name on it, to be extremely loosely connected to this incredible musician who's often overlooked. So what makes a Trini a Trini? Well, you might be forgiven for thinking it's just a standard 335, and it mostly is. But if you look closely, you'll see some distinct little differences that make it truly unique. These differences include bound diamond-shaped F-holes, split diamond inlays on the fretboard, a decorative rosewood plaque on the tailpiece that bears Trini Lopez's name, and most importantly, the Firebird headstock, which I think is the coolest looking shit ever. It's a beak on the end of your guitar. That's amazing! Trini specified the 6-in-line Firebird headstock because he grew up playing Fenders, so for him, having all the tuners in a row was natural. The Firebird headstock boasts nearly straight string pull, which is somewhat of an advantage for some people. I know Gibson guitars get a lot of flack for the 3-on-3 headstock not being great for tuning stability, but that simply isn't true. It all comes down to a properly cut and dressed nut. We'll get into that down the road. Now, even with all these features, yeah, it's still just your basic thin-line semi-hollow body guitar. But this particular Trini Lopez, well, it's a little bit more special than that. For a clue about what makes this Trini special, let's look at the back of the headstock. You see anything missing? That would be a serial number. This one doesn't have one on the back of the headstock. What it does have is a little blue sticker that says 25 NAMM. That's right, this guitar was one of 6 samples made for the NAMM show. With it being one of the 2019 NAMM guitars, this means it's one of the last guitars produced at the Memphis plant, which means a lot to me because I know that those employees put a lot of pride into the work that they do, and when Gibson announced that it was closing the Memphis plant, well, that was a sad day for music in general. So, Memphis forever, I'm thrilled to have it. This guitar features the VOS or Vintage Original Spec finish package, which is a nitrocellulose finish that's been lightly deglossed to give it that kind of worn-in vintage look. The hardware is also artificially aged, but tastefully. Everything still works, thankfully, although I can't say the same for a lot of relic guitars that I've worked on in the past. And it's worth mentioning that because this guitar was made for NAMM and it was played by maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of people, it's got a few dings, a few scratches. That's not a big deal. I like a used guitar. You know, it's kind of special that it's been played so much before it got to me. Another thing I really like about this guitar is that it's got a pair of MHS2 pickups. MHS stands for Memphis Historic Spec, and the 2 denotes that it's not one of the PAF reissues, rather, it's meant to replicate that mid-60s patent sticker pickup. It's a little bit brighter, it's got a little bit more bite, a little bit more edge. It's not high output by any means, and that works out perfectly for me because I don't really like humbuckers that are over, say, 9K in terms of resistance. Once they hit that level, it feels like they start losing something in the low end and the high end. They get really honky in the mid-range, and that just doesn't work for me. So these pickups are great. These pickups are expressive, they are biting, they are full-sounding, and they are dynamic, which I love. The touch sensitivity here, it's just outrageous. Have a listen. Now, what's interesting about the specs for this guitar is that now that Gibson has announced the model and they're on the website, the specs have changed in a few ways. The new ones will come with nylon saddles instead of metal like mine has. Also, the pickups are different. The Gibson website lists the custom Bucker Alnico 3 as the pickup of choice for this model. So if you get one now, it won't have the MHS2s, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I really like these pickups. My experience with the custom Bucker is that they are a little too thin sounding. Another thing that makes this Trini Lopez very special is that it's one of the last guitars produced in the Memphis plant. You see, they were announced in 2019, and then soon thereafter, Gibson made the decision to close the Memphis plant. So employees, equipment, all of that got moved to the Nashville plant where the solid body guitars are made. In the middle of that process, and just as they were ready to open up, COVID-19 struck, and that threw the entire guitar industry into disarray. So many plants and factories are either closed or restricted in the operations that they can take on. So a lot of Gibson's output for this year is going to be hard to get. So in talking to people at Gibson, I'm not even certain that we'll see the Trini Lopez until the end of this year or even 2021, when things are hopefully back up and everybody is able to work safely. So yeah, this might be the only Trini Lopez reissue that you see floating around for a while. Now, with as over the moon as I am with this guitar, there are a couple of nitpicks that I have, and they're all preference-based. There's nothing wrong with the guitar. Now, the first little nitpick I have is the color. I'll be honest, I completely fell in love with the transparent red one that was at Gibson's booth the last 2 years. In fact, I took a ton of pictures of myself with it and of it, and pretty much kept going back to the Gibson booth specifically to see that guitar. That one was fantastic. This one's fantastic. I'm not complaining at all, but I'm not really into black as a color because I've already got guitars that are black, and black as a finish is just so incredibly difficult to keep clean. The fingerprints on this guitar, it took me like 15 minutes to polish this, and because I polished it so much, that almost did away with the VOS finish package anyway, because I kind of brightened up that finish a little bit. And from spending years fantasizing about owning a Trini Lopez, I have utterly fallen in love with the Gibson color Sparkling Burgundy. Sparkling Burgundy was Gibson's answer in the 60s to Fender's Candy Apple Red, and oh my god, it's one of the best finishes I have ever seen. It's this wonderful shade of metallic red that fades over time to metallic candy apple orange. It's the coolest finish ever. So maybe down the line, when I get more comfortable with owning this one, maybe I'll send it off to get refinished. I know my good friend Joe Riggio in Tacoma, Washington, has actually reworked an old Trini Lopez that was messed up and refinished it in Sparkling Burgundy. And so, Joe, you're on notice. I might be sending you a weird email soon. Now for the playability complaint, and again, it's not a problem with the guitar, it is a problem with me personally. I find the neck just a little bit too wide. Previously, I've discussed my love of skinny nuts. Skinny nuts! And at the standard Gibson 1 11/16, it's just a little bit too wide for me to feel super comfortable on, at least out of the gate. By no means is it unplayable, it's just a little bit too wide for the way I like to play. And I completely blame Fender for this because I've become so used to playing their B and A width necks over the years that it's just impossible for me to play anything wider than that and feel comfortable. Check it out. I don't know if you can see this on camera, but I fully blame Pancake in particular. Pancake started out life with a B width neck, which is 1 5/8 from the factory. It's not all that different from 1 11/16. However, over years of being played hard, this thing has actually worn down to about 1 9/16 in the first position, which is Gibson's standard mid-1960s neck width. My old SG had it, even my 77 ES355 had it, and I find that so immensely comfortable that, yeah, the Trini Lopez just feels a little bit wide to me. So yeah, guitar manufacturers, if you're listening, please bring back skinny nut widths and slim neck profiles. Do it for your old pal Mike. Come on! Otherwise, I love this thing, and I gotta say, it sounds incredible, it plays great, and once I get used to this neck, I think I'm gonna be a lot happier with it. It's just good to be back in the Gibson camp again after so many years of not owning a proper Gibson electric. And the semi-hollow thing, that just works for me. I just love that hollow mid-range sound. Now, I'm sure at this point some of you are wondering, oh, what about mods? Because you know me, I like to make a guitar work for me. I'm thinking about putting a Bigsby vibrato on here because having a guitar without one right now that's really tricky for me. I'm always reaching for something that it isn't there, and I like a little bit of warble. So I've got a spare Bigsby around, although it is bright and clean and shiny and new, so I'm gonna have to figure out some way to dull that a little bit. I'm a little hesitant to do that because of the very limited status of this guitar, so we'll see. I don't know if I'm brave enough to ruin the collectible value of this very rare guitar. And if I'm going to go to the trouble of throwing a Bigsby on, I may as well put a Varitone in there too. A Varitone is a 6-position notch filter that was standard on ES345s and ES355s, as well as the Lucille B.B. King model that you may have seen around. It's a wonderful little trick for recording. I remember using it a lot live too, because that 6th position is just thin and weird and wiry in the best way. The Varitone gets a bad rap for being destructive to tone, but it really isn't the case if you wire them in the circuit correctly. Really, the stereo wiring is why a lot of people have problems when they sum it back together for mono use. That'll be a subject of another video. Now, if you're interested in owning a Trini Lopez of your own and you're not able to find one of these really cool new reissues, Gibson did reissue the Trini Lopez, I think back in 2012 or 2013, but do note that they had a slightly bigger neck, they had the wrong ears, very Mickey Mouse looking, and they didn't bind the F-holes, which is actually why I didn't buy one in the first place. That little bit of plastic makes all the difference to me visually. I don't know. I'm weird. There's also the Dave Grohl model, which is based on the Trini Lopez guitar, something that Dave was known for playing before he had his own signature model. Now, his has one difference in that it's got the stop tailpiece, which, I don't know, doesn't really work for me. I want to put a Bigsby on things, or I like having that added string length behind the bridge, so the trapeze is perfect for me. And also, I don't think the trapeze honestly makes that big of a tonal difference over the stop tail. So yeah, the Dave Grohl models are out there, and they come in some fun colors like blue and gold. They are also like $7,000 on Reverb, so if you can afford one of those, you may just want to buy an actual 60s Trini Lopez model. Also, take note that there's a Trini Lopez Deluxe model as well that was built around the Barney Kessel guitar that Trini was playing back in the day. That guitar is maybe the most evil-looking jazz box in the world, and it's totally cool. It's really worth your time to check out. So have a look at those on Reverb. They are a little bit more affordable, but they haven't been reissued as far as I know. Anyway, I've got to keep playing this and getting used to this neck, but I'm really loving it so far, and the sound is really working for me. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this. I hope that you've learned a little bit about Trini Lopez and why he's important, as well as what makes the Trini Lopez standard guitar such a cool instrument. And who knows, now I have no excuse not to start that Oasis tribute band I've always wanted.